All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Sarah Verdone. I'm a planner associate with the Next Level Planning Group. This is the second part in a two-part series about financial wellness. I did record the last part, which was last week, and I'll be sending that recording out along with this one to everyone who registered right after this meeting. So if you weren't able to attend last week, no problem. I will send that to you. And let's go ahead and get started with today. All right, so the topics we're going to cover today are investing, retirement planning, and insurance. During last week's session, we talked about setting goals and making a plan, budgeting, debt management, and savings. So again, if you weren't able to come last week, no problem. I'll be sending out the recording for that so you're able to watch. And then, so for today, the most important things to keep in mind are taking notes, saving any questions for the end, and be present for this meeting. So there will be a lot of information in this session like last, and just any questions you have, save them for the end. I'm happy to go through them. Okay. All right, starting with investing. So for those of you who were here last week, this part is going to be a little bit of a review. We start with where to put your money. So what type of accounts should you have in order to save money and build wealth? So the first thing to do when you're building wealth is to pay off any high interest debt that you have first. So before you start saving anything extra, get rid of any high interest debt, because that's just costing you a lot more than is likely you'll earn over a long rate of return by investing your money. After that, if you have a 401k available to you, put in at least enough in that to get the match from your employer. Because it's free money, we want to take advantage of it. After that, build an emergency savings. So 3 to 6 months of expenses is the general rule. That really kind of just depends on your comfort level, how much you want in savings. Some people are fine with 3, others really need 6. We sometimes also refer to this as a sleep well at night number. How much money do you need to have in cash so that you're able to sleep well at night? After you've maxed that out, then we're going to go back to 401k. So if you are under age 50, then you can put in a max of $20,500 into your 401k. If you're over 50, so parents, things like that, they can do 27, but right now it's 20,500. So after you've finished filling up your emergency savings, put anything extra into your 401k until you max it out. After you've maxed out your 401k, the next place to begin saving is in a Roth IRA. So a Roth IRA is an after-tax retirement account. Your money goes into it post-tax and it grows tax-free. And then as long as you don't take the money out until you're older than 59 and a half and the account's been open for at least 5 years, you never pay any tax on the earnings. And then after you've maxed out all these places, the next place to go is a taxable investment account. So it's an account the government doesn't give you any tax advantages on it, but you're still able to invest in the market. And it's better than keeping your money in cash. I also usually say once you've hit that level, that's when it makes sense to start talking to an advisor, an investment broker, someone who can help you make good decisions about what you're investing in and can help you select an asset allocation. All right, now that we've talked about all these places, once your money is there, how should you invest it? That is the next question. This pyramid goes through the 5 key components of investing. The ones on the bottom are most important. The ones at the top, slightly less important. The thing to keep in mind while looking at this is the question, why do we invest our money in the first place? It's typically to accomplish a specific goal over a specific timeline, like retirement. And, it's what factors are important to reach that goal. The first one is investor behavior, then asset allocation, fees and transaction costs, security selection, and taxes. Investing can be a really overwhelming conversation or topic to think about. And my goal here is really just to provide a good framework to all of you to help you keep in mind the most important things to get right. So even though these top three matter, they matter less than the bottom two. And since we don't have a ton of time today, I'm going to focus on these two at the bottom. Starting with asset allocations, we're going to go over 4 rules to help make this a little easier when you're trying to figure out what to invest your money in. Most people struggle with this because managing investments isn't something we're taught in school, and most people are just left to their own devices to manage their investments and figure this out. And it can leave a lot of people feeling stuck or forced to make less than ideal decisions. There's a lot of conflicting information available, and all of it can be really overwhelming. So we're going to go through these 4 rules for long-term investments. And these are rules you can stick by through ups and downs of the markets, media broadcasts, or anything that your friends and family might be doing or telling you to do. The first rule is to identify your time frame for when you're going to need the money. And this doesn't have to be precise, but like 5 to 10 years or so within your current target. For most of us, retirement is at least 30 years away. Maybe it's 35, maybe it's 25. You don't need to know exactly, just a general time frame. The most important reason for that is that you can't control what markets do, and they're impossible to predict in the short term. So if you need money sooner, like in less than 10 years, you need to invest more of your money in investments that aren't likely to drop by 20 to 40% in 1 year. But if you have a long-term time horizon, like 10 or more years, then you have time to come back if there's a big market drop and possibly even benefit from buying when prices are lower. So an example could be like you have 20 years until you're retired. The next rule is to pick your stock and bond mixture based on your time frame. So some general rules are, if you need the money in less than 10 years, you're going to want 60% or less of your money in stocks. If you have 20 or more years, then 80 to 90% in stocks is probably a good number. The reason for this is that the stock markets of the world have higher rates of return on average than the bond markets of the world, especially over long periods of time. In order to achieve those higher returns, though, the trade-off is that there's a lot more volatility. You might have some years where your account is up 15%, and then it's down 5%, and then it's flat, and then it's up 10%, etc. And that works great when you're adding money. But when you need to take money out, this isn't ideal, because taking money out of your investments when the market is down is like the cardinal sin of investing. Bonds are less volatile, but the trade-off for that relative stability is that you're going to have lower average rates of return. If you have a long-term time horizon, you likely don't want to have too many bonds in your portfolio because your returns will be lower, but they can serve as helpful buffers for big drawdowns. So putting something in bonds is a good thing. So in this example that we're going with here, we have 20 years to retirement. So let's think about a 90% stock, 10% bond allocation. After we know our time frame and stock bond mixture, we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and start thinking about the different asset classes to invest in. Okay, we want to diversify. So the first thing you should think about when you hear the word stock market is which one. Most of us invest in a lot of different markets. In the US alone, there are different markets you can invest in. The main market or asset classes that you'll want to participate in are US large companies, US small or mid-sized companies, international developed companies, international emerging markets, and real estate. These are all on the equity side. On the bond side, you'll want to think about high yield bonds, government bonds, and investment grade bonds. For each of these markets, my suggestion is to own mutual funds that focus on each of them instead of buying individual stocks. Mutual funds are just a collection of stocks, so you have to be less right to participate in the overall market growth. And the main reason to diversify is that each of these markets move at different rates. From one year to the next, you don't know which one is going to be up or down or completely flat. Having some exposure to each of these will help you get maximum returns long-term. I'd be getting into too many specifics if I walked through what the exact breakdown should be for you. And it varies too much depending on your stock bond breakdown and your goal. But I'm hopeful that with this knowledge, you can, potentially talk to a financial professional or start your own research from here and figure out what the right breakdown for you is. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to talk about them at the end, or you can shoot me a chat or an email and we can set up some time. All right. So now that we know the first three rules, the last one is to rebalance. Now that you've got your stock and bond mixture and your asset allocation, you'll add money to your accounts and the markets will move. So your accounts are going to get off balance. And you'll want to true up to whatever targets you set, at least to 1 to 2 times per year, or when there are big market drops of 20% or more. You don't want to do this every week or month. It can actually hurt your long-term performance to do that. But pick 2 dates a year where you sit down and rebalance to your targets, or set your accounts up to automatically do this. So in this example that we've been looking at, we could have 30% go to large cap, 10 to small mid-sized companies, another 30 to international, another 10 to emerging markets, 10 to real estate, 5 for high yield bonds, 2 for government bonds, and 3 for investment grade bonds. And then twice a year, we would look at our accounts and true them up to make sure that we keep these targets. Finally, if the thought of doing all this yourself feels intimidating or unrealistic for you, you're not alone. And I've got good news. So your 401k or whatever investment accounts you have, they have an investment called a target date fund, and it does it all for you. You can put 100% of your money in these accounts, and they will reallocate your account to be more conservative as you get closer to your goal. And they do it all automatically. If you have any questions about how these work, again, I'm happy to answer them at the end of this session, or one-on-one, send me an email, a chat. I'm happy to go through all this more thoroughly. All right, I know that was a lot of information, but we're going to move on from the asset allocation rules to the 3 investor behavior virtues. And this is the most important thing to get right when it comes to investment for performance. The first one is humility. So as a financial investor and a professional, I have to admit what I don't know and what I don't have control over. It is impossible to time the market or to predict what the market is going to do in the short term. Holding cash for too long is expensive. If you sell when you think the market is high and try to get back in when it's low, you have to be right twice. First when you sell and then when you get back in, and it is impossible to predict the markets in the short term. Save consistently and automatically. So for example, if you know you can save $50 a month, then automate that investment for $50 a month, no matter what the market is doing. Follow the 4 rules that we talked about on the asset allocation page and stick to them. The next virtue is grit. The market is a pendulum. Barring any apocalyptic scenario when money won't matter anyways, when the market goes down, it will go back up. The only unknown is when that's going to happen. And again, like no one knows when it's going to happen, especially people online, on TikTok, on CNBC, who try to tell you that they know when it's going to happen. They definitely don't know. The final virtue is perseverance. You should only change your asset allocation as you age, not as the markets move. You know, the media, news, trading platforms, your friends, your family, they might tell you the opposite or make you question your strategy, but you selected an asset allocation strategy that was right for you, regardless of the ups and downs of the market. The market being up or down should only cause you to rebalance to those targets, not change them completely. It is super important to get all these virtues right. The biggest drawbacks I have seen in my career, or when someone doesn't have enough money to reach their goal, have usually happened because they've failed at practicing one of these. This is the most important thing to keep in mind. And, you know, a lot of us are, you know, in our 20s or 30s, we do have a long-term time horizon. Getting all of this right starting now will set you up for a lot of successes, especially in retirement. And that brings us to our next section. All right, so talking about retirement, I know that this is really far away for us, but it is like so important to start thinking about this and planning for it right now to set yourself up for success. So the first thing you want to start thinking about is your goal. So start thinking like at what age? And this doesn't have to be exact. I mean, if you're I'm 27, it's really hard for me to know at exactly what age I'm going to want to retire. Some things to think about are, you know, do you want to try to have an early retirement? For example, I would really love to retire when I'm like in my mid-50s. Something to think about there is I won't qualify for Medicare yet. Medicare kicks in at 65, so I'll have a 10-year gap where I need to pay for my own health insurance. You know, that costs a lot more. If you're okay working at your Medicare age, again, right now, that 65, there's a good chance it will be even older by the time we get there as life expectancies increase. If you're like, I don't know what Medicare is, that's okay. You're certainly not alone in that. I'm happy to talk about that more at the end of the presentation, but essentially, so you know, you pay into it right now, you give the government money out of all of your checks so that when you're older, you get some state-funded health insurance at a really low premium to you. That's essentially what it is. All right, so after you think about your age, think about where you want to live. So I live in Chicago. I'm from Chicago. You know, I love living here, but it's a really expensive place to live. So, you know, in retirement, are you going to want to stay in a city? Are you okay with living in a suburb, somewhere rural? Are you like me and I picture myself on the beach drinking a margarita every day in retirement? You know, that's a more expensive place to live. It's something else to consider when trying to figure out how much you need to have saved. And then what will you be doing? You know, is travel really important to you? I mean, it's kind of hard to think about one day having grandkids, but you know, you might if you plan on having children. Do you want to be able to take your whole family on vacations in retirement? Or are you like, no, I'm fine just taking going around the United States, no big trips to Europe. I don't need to fly. I'm happy to drive. These are really important to keep in mind. And then lifestyle. Do you want to maintain the exact same lifestyle you have right now in retirement? You know, so think about like going out to eat, buying clothes, concerts, sports ball games, everything like that. Now, again, likely towards the end of retirement, you may not be doing a bunch of those things, but people are retiring earlier and living longer. So if you're retiring in your 50s, your 60s, you will probably have the health and the capacity to want to do a lot of the fun things you're doing now. And then once you answer those top 4 questions, that's when you can start thinking about how much money you will need per month and per year. And when thinking about this math, it's fine to figure out how much money you'll need per month or year in today's dollars, and then we can extrapolate it to the future. especially because your money is going to be invested towards retirement. So it will like if everything goes right, and if you stick to the 4 asset allocation rules and investor behavior virtues, you'll earn a rate of return that's greater than what inflation was. So it's not super important for you to spend a lot of time concerned about that. All right, so now thinking about how much you need. Some important considerations. Will your mortgage be paid off? So some of you may not have purchased a home yet. It's totally fine. But once you do, thinking about if you're 30 and have a 30-year mortgage and you want to retire at 55, you'll have another 5 years of paying that off in retirement. Or maybe you're fine with, once you get to retirement, selling your home and purchasing something that's less expensive for cash, so you won't have to worry about that at all. And then Social Security income. So this is really difficult for us to predict. A lot of people are concerned that Social Security is going to go away or won't be there in retirement. I don't think there's going to be an apocalyptic Social Security scenario for where it just goes away completely. And the simple reason for that is no politician will be reelected if they get rid of Social Security. I do think a lot of changes will be made. So like I said, right now, full Social Security age is 67. I think it will increase, so even by the time we're that age. So it might be more like 75, but I don't think it will be gone completely. So it's hard to plan for this, but you might have read a lot of stuff where it sounds like it's going away completely. I don't think that is likely, and that it will be there for us in some form. But what form that's going to be is TBD. And then adjusting for inflation. So when you do get a Social Security income like estimate, if you look at that online, it shows it in today's dollars. So that will obviously change as time goes on, but it's really hard to predict in the short term. All right, the next thing is your investment rate of return before and after retirement. So even though right now having your investments really aggressive makes sense, by the time you're in retirement, it won't anymore. So you can expect lower returns in retirement simply because you don't have a long time horizon, and it's going to be important for you to be withdrawing money at that point. So you won't want to have a lot of money in risky assets. More of your money will be in bonds. And then the next thing to think about is withdrawal rates. So there's a few different things to consider with withdrawal rates as it relates to when you can retire. There's one rule that I'm going to go through that I think is really helpful, and this one is called the 4% rule. There are two ways to think about this rule, and how much am I on track to save away, and then how much income do I want to have per year from your portfolio. So the 4% rule, so if you retire in your mid-60s, 4% or less is the withdrawal rate you want to have, because that gives you a healthy chance that you won't run out of money. But this is just a rule of thumb. This isn't a guarantee, but it does provide a helpful framework. So for example, if at retirement you have $500,000, if you multiply that by 4%, then you can have $20,000 of annual income per year without worrying about running out of money. In another example, if you were like, okay, I know I need at least $35,000 a year, you can divide that by 4%, and that shows you the portfolio you need. Some important considerations for you to know is that your money has to be invested. You don't want to be too conservative or too risky. We just talked about that in retirement, it will make sense for you to be more conservative. This isn't infallible. You could have some early years of bad performance in retirement that will affect this. There are some other strategies to think about as well. You can consider having an income-only portfolio in retirement, which is where you don't ever touch the principal, but you just live on the income, the interest, and the dividends that your portfolio spits off every year. There are a few others, but I think this is the most important one to consider right now as we're planning for retirement. All right. So now we've kind of got an idea of how to figure out what number to strive for. So talking about how much you can save. So this slide is going to be familiar to those of you who were at our meeting last week. And I think this equation that we're going to go through again is really the most important one for you to know when creating a portfolio, planning for retirement, or really any big goal that's financial that you have. So figuring out how much you can save now, the first thing that we need to do is figure out our take-home income. And sometimes, like I know right now I have 2 jobs, so getting this number, you can look at a pay stub, but if you have like a side gig, like I bartend on the weekends, like, and that income is a little bit, unstable. Like right now it's January and February in Chicago, people don't want to go out, so it's less and it's a lot more over the summer. But trying to figure out a good average of your income is really important. The second piece to figure out is how much you spend. So you have some monthly fixed expenses. The best way to figure out this number I found is to look at your past checking account and credit card statements for at least the last 6 months and take an average to get a really good idea of how much you're spending every month. And that gives you your gap. And I do think it is helpful to figure this out on an annual and a monthly basis. But the gap is where you build wealth and where you hit your financial goals. So depending on your time horizon, but like the amount of gap money that you need varies. But if you have more than 15 years, then saving like between 15 to 20% will usually get you to your goal. Save in those buckets we've talked about on that first slide, like the Roth IRA and your 401k, because you don't want taxes to drag down your investment returns while you're not touching your money. And for some of you might be thinking saving 15 to 20% of your income like just isn't realistic right now. And I get that. I have been in that situation too. But I do think it's important to start thinking about what needs to happen so that you can hit those numbers, because that is really what's going to make the biggest impact on your ability to build wealth and hit whatever financial goals you have. Okay, so now that we know what to do and where to save for our financial goals, particularly retirement, it's really important to track your progress. So you want to revisit your plan every year and think about how you're doing towards your goals and if they're still the same. And then what adjustments, if any, you need to make. I have also found Mint or Excel for budget tracking to be really helpful. I use Mint personally. I think it's really great. You can link your credit cards to it and your checking accounts, and it automatically categorizes what's a need versus a want versus saving. It's not perfect. I do go in once a week to recategorize some things. For example, Amazon purchase could just be a want, or it could be a need. I get groceries from Amazon sometimes. So just double checking it and making sure that everything's being categorized correctly is really helpful. And I think it can really help to highlight what areas you can cut back on. And then some people just like Excel. There's a ton of Excel budget templates out there. You could do a really quick Google search for Excel budget templates and a bunch will come up. All right, that was everything for retirement. We're going to start talking about insurance. And we'll start here with life insurance. I get asked a lot of questions about whether you should have term insurance or permanent insurance. And so I'm going to give a quick tutorial about the difference. So here we go, term and permanent insurance. So term insurance, it's like renting, it's temporary, and it's cheap. There's no cash value. Permanent insurance is like owning. It's permanent in the sense that as long as you keep paying your premium, You're always going to have it. It's not going anywhere. It does accumulate a cash value. And then there are 3 different types. There's whole life, universal life, and variable universal life. For most people, term insurance is fine. And I usually recommend getting term life insurance when you have someone else who's relying on your income. So for example, usually when people get married and they have a mortgage and they're still really young, it makes sense to have enough term insurance so that your spouse doesn't have to move out of your home if you were to pass away unexpectedly. And then also if you have children, having enough term insurance so that your family can maintain their lifestyle, even if something were to unexpectedly happen to you, is important, especially if you want to help pay for college and things like that. And I think term insurance is fine because, for example, you have a 30-year mortgage, you have some young kids. After 30 years, those things are gone and you really don't have an insurance need anymore. So it's fine to take the cheaper option, especially because term insurance isn't like half the price of permanent insurance, it's like 1/10. There are some good reasons to have permanent insurance. For example, business owners have what's called buy-sell insurance, so that if one business owner could pass away, that business owner's family the opposite owner can purchase that business owner's share and be able to run the business without necessarily having to involve the family. There's a few other reasons as well, but it's very specific. Usually term insurance is a fine option. And then when people have questions about how much they should have, 10 times your income is the very general rule of thumb. But it's very personal. It depends on what you or your spouse would likely do if something were to happen to you. It depends on what other assets you have. This is a really broad financial planning question, and it is really dependent on the other parts of your financial plan. So if you have specific questions about this, I'm happy to answer questions at the end or set up some time for your personal situation. All right, so the next type of insurance, and this right now is the most important for anyone in our age group. We're going to look at an example. So disability income insurance. So let's say you're offered 2 jobs. Job A pays you $50,000 when you're healthy, or $0 when you're sick or hurt. Job B gives you $49,000 when you're healthy and $30,000 if you're sick or hurt. So looking at this, thinking about, which job would you rather have? And disability insurance, it's never like a fun check to write, but when you're young, your biggest asset is your ability to earn income. Everything in your life financially depends on it. So having some disability income insurance is really important. You might have a policy through your employer. If so, that's great. Make sure you're taking advantage of it, even if it's taking a little bit of money out of your check every week. The right amount to have is between 60 to 70% of your insurance, and this is long-term disability insurance. And the reason the number is 60 to 70% is because that's really the maximum amount you can have. Insurers don't want to insure 100% because they want people to have an incentive to go back to work if and when they're able. All right, so I know that was a lot of information, and I have a checklist here for everything that you should do to make sure that you're on track. So first thing to do is schedule time each week or month to look at money stuff. The second is to set short and long-term financial goals. Create a budget that aligns with your financial goals and review it often. Pay off any high interest debt. Automate your savings wherever possible. Build an emergency fund. maximize your tax efficient savings, organize your investments and determine asset allocation, evaluate life insurance needs, evaluate your disability income insurance needs, and then get wills and powers of attorney for healthcare and property executed. So we didn't spend a lot of time on estate planning. I didn't have a slide for it. Usually when you're young, it's totally fine to get a simple will and simple powers of attorney executed. I usually recommend that people use LegalZoom instead of actually going and paying for an attorney. That's more expensive and isn't necessary, but it is really important to at least have some documents in case the unthinkable happens. It makes everything a lot easier on your family to have these documents. And also to make sure that all of your investment accounts have beneficiaries on them and that your checking and savings accounts are payable on death to someone. All right, so some of you might be looking at this list and are thinking that you've got it, which is great. Some of you might be looking at this and might be thinking the exact opposite, uncertain of what to do, overwhelmed, and some of you are in between. Most financial firms won't work with you until you have a large amount of money to invest or an insurance need. We're one of the few firms that have a business model that allows us to work with young people, irrespective of your financial situation, and provide you personalized advice. So if you're interested in having a brief call to learn more about this or to ask me some questions that you have after looking at all these slides, then please feel free to email me or text me or send me a private chat now. I'm happy to talk about that. But otherwise, I will open up the floor to more general questions. But otherwise, at the end of our presentation, thank you for coming this week and last week. I will send out the recordings of these, so you'll have that to look at whenever you want. But I really appreciate all of you who were able to come. I really enjoy doing this. And yeah, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put them in the chat. No one has any questions, that's totally fine. Or if you just don't feel like sitting in front of a group of people, you're welcome. Yeah, if you don't have questions and you prefer to hop off, you can. Oh, Gabby, does it matter if you start with a Roth IRA or 401k? So I say to start with a 401k if you have an employer match, because that match is free money. If there's no employer match, or if you don't have access to a 401k, then I would go with the Roth option first, because it's an account that you have access to yourself. There's likely more fund options as well. And I think you can open, you can open a Roth IRA at like Betterment or Fidelity, wherever you want. I usually recommend the 401k first because there's usually an employer match. But if that doesn't exist, then I think it's fine to start with the Roth IRA.
Sarah, I have a question. What is your opinion on the growing influence of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies when it comes to an investment portfolio?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I talk to a lot of people about this. I have some clients that I work with who have made a lot of money on crypto. I don't have a strong opinion for or against it. What I think about when it comes to crypto, as opposed to traditional investing in like stock markets, is the value of crypto is so wholly dependent about how people feel about it in that moment in time. And to some extent, that's true of stock markets. But also, when I'm buying a piece of Apple, I know that I can go and look and see how much did Apple sell last year? are they still relevant in the market? I know people are buying, McDonald's hamburgers, you can see an actual evaluation of a company and why that is worth some money. That's, not true of crypto at all. So I look at crypto as a completely speculative investment because, like anyone can start one. I mean, like look at Dogecoin.
Right.
So I listen, but I will also say, like, if you really want to hold some, then do it. I would advise just not with all of your money. So like, I think of my retirement assets, like that I would really keep in more traditional investments, what's in your 401k, what's in your Roth IRA. But also if you really want to buy some crypto, I mean, do it. Just, don't bet the farm on it would be my advice.
Right. No, and that's kind of the way that I've been looking at it. Do you have any sort of advice on how to get started? Because, I don't want it to be one of those things where, this is a Netflix or this is an Amazon before you knew about the boom. And especially recently, I've been reading that, towns like Miami and New York want to start paying their city officials in Bitcoin, like within the next 10 years. And so, that really makes me think, and obviously it is a speculative investment. And I agree with everything that you said about, you're able to actually go into a company's annual report and, really see what you're getting into, but crypto is much more speculative. But when it comes to actually getting started, I know the research isn't really there, but do you have any sort of advice for that?
Yeah. And so one of the first things that I'm thinking about is, I don't know what you're reading, but cities like New York or Miami wanting to pay their employees with cryptocurrency in 10 years, that cannot be right because they are US cities. They have to pay their employees in US dollars. They can't pay them with something else, even if they wanted to. That's not an option. So
Right.
I would just like make sure and like because there's a lot of information out there, but I would try to not read whatever the people who are trying to get you to buy crypto are saying, or like I know there's like magazines that are devoted to like Bitcoin or crypto. They are all going to have the opinion of trying to get you to buy it. And so they're going to say stuff that's probably at least a little bit untrue. I think for getting started, I don't have a strong opinion, for example, on like buying Ethereum versus Bitcoin versus Dogecoin, except for I do think the dog on Dogecoin is very cute. So I'm probably a little bit biased to that one. I think like I would say, so getting started, like I would make sure that you're like whatever app or software you're going to use to buy it. So I know like Square Cash, for example, has like low transaction fees. Don't spend a ton of money converting. But I don't have a great strategy for Bitcoin like I do with more traditional investments.
Right.
No, asset allocation. It's so much more difficult to know. I also know Ethereum has crypto kitties. I don't totally understand what they are, but they look cute as well. So at least you could look at art in that sense.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer for you.
No, it's totally okay. I'm not sure that anybody really does, and it's something that's again so speculative. The whole thing with Dogecoin is Elon Musk tweeted about it, and all of a sudden it's a major cryptocurrency. But before that, it was trading for fractions of a cent. But there's just, and I think this is one of the difficulties of getting into investing in the age that we're in now, is just the amount of information that's pretty much being fed to us. Right. And it's difficult to really see what the right strategy is, because there's so many different outlets telling us the complete opposite thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think with crypto, especially, there were like 4 or 5 Super Bowl commercials just about cryptocurrency, like it's really becoming this huge push. So I completely get the interest. Again, I don't think buying some is necessarily bad. I mean, people have made a lot of money out of it before. Like I said, just like don't bet the farm.
Yeah. And I mean, people have made a lot of money on penny stocks as well, but they kind of fall into the same bracket of,
Right.
it's not really investing, it's more so gambling.
Exactly. I think that's a really great way to look at it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks for that question. All right. If no one else has anything, feel free to hop off. I will send out this recording and then you'll have, so my phone number and email are here. It'll also be in my email signature. So please feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions. I'm happy to be a resource, but it's been a pleasure doing this and I hope everyone has a great night. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah.